again, everyone who's listening to this on Thursday, no spoilers at this point because everything's happened already, but Bob Roode has moved to SmackDown.
Robert Roode. It's Bob Fish.
Excuse me, Robert Roode.
Yeah.
Has moved over to SmackDown. I think he's still going to have a match in NXT with Roderick Strong, but he's moved up to the main roster now. So after this show,
I thought they said whoever the champion was.
I thought it was just Roddy got a match with Bobby Roode, regardless of whether it was for the title.
Okay, I could be wrong.
We'll see, I guess, after the tapings tonight what they play out. But anyway, so McIntyre won, and then as he was quote unquote celebrating, they even threw up the copyright graphic on the bottom.
Get me every time with that.
And then all of a sudden, Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish had appeared on the ring apron and kind of distracted McIntyre. And as that was happening, you heard kind of a roar developing in the crowd in Brooklyn. And sure enough, the long-rumored debut of Adam Cole took place. And he ran in and attacked Drew McIntyre with the help of Fish and O'Reilly. They held him up for Cole, and Cole superkicked them and basically superkicked McIntyre. And basically they stood over him as the show went off the air, essentially forming a stable between the three of them. And with Cole looking to go after the NXT title pretty much right away.
Were you excited to see Adam Cole? I think that would be an understatement.
I was excited. I jumped up and down, I believe.
I think we both did. I think you're exactly right. Now, my only problem is it me or did Morrow immediately know that was Adam Cole? Like,
did you listen to the Taz show on Sunday or anything like that? Because someone called up on the Taz show once. I was driving home Sunday night after SummerSlam.
Okay.
Someone called into the Taz show and asked that exact question, basically saying that when Cole ran in, Morrow identified him immediately. Before anybody else really could even see that it was him, because he ran in, you only saw him from behind.
Right.
You kind of see like his hair as he was punching away at McIntyre, and Taz actually said that it was a mistake, so essentially from Morrow, that he did that. He shouldn't have identified him right away. Made him come off as maybe being smarter than the fans in some sense.
I actually read it on one of the not a dirt sheet, one of the Facebook groups. So then I went back and I rewatched the match, and he actually calls out Adam Cole like before he even gets in the ring. I mean, to me, like, I think you and I knew what was going to happen. So, but to somebody else, you'd have to. But then, not even a split second after that, you have Nigel saying the same thing. So I guess that air of invincibility is gone, that question, if you will. But now, I mean, the landscape of NXT has changed completely. I mean, and I think it's for the better, because NXT, I know I haven't watched it very much recently. I think, I catch up as much as I can, but it's not something I can't, that I'm going to stay home on a Wednesday night to watch, and I have to be there for it. Now, I'm going to be watching NXT. Now, everything has kind of changed. You have three of my favorite wrestlers in the entire world, actually four if you include Roderick Strong, all under one banner, getting 1 hour a week. I am 100% on board.
Yeah, it's hard not to be if you're someone who's followed those guys in Ring of Honor and elsewhere. And I think we've been following them probably for about 4 years or so on the indies, when we started to kind of really get focused on some of those companies and shows. So those are guys that we've watched for a long time. We've seen them wrestle in person several times. We've met them, at autograph signings and take pictures with them and stuff like that. So it's, guys that you do that with, I think you kind of,
when they recognize you, it's like,
you're kind of along for the ride with these guys as they're hitting their peak and their prime of their careers. And now that they make it to this level, and then not only to make it to NXT, but to have the impact that they did on, O'Reilly and Fish had one match each in NXT just kind of to get them on the program. But this was essentially their debut as a team, and then Cole's debut overall. So for them to come in and pretty much right at the main event level, to see them achieve that success right away is pretty cool. For all the years we've seen them going, and we know they're obviously really talented and hardworking guys. And I like NXT probably more than any other show that I watch at this point, or in any company. So I have faith that they'll be able to book them in a manner that keeps them interesting and strong before, with some storylines over the next year or so. I think that'll be cool to watch. So I'm looking forward to that a lot.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's kind of interesting how, the most over thing right now on NXT is just, superstars that the WWE has taken from somewhere else, and they haven't been able to really build anybody up in NXT. I mean, when you look at the entire NXT roster right now, who is the homegrown talent in NXT that's over with the crowd?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say, I guess. I mean, if you look at like teams, like All Japan, I think is a homegrown team. I don't know what else they've done.
I'll give you the AOP.
I don't know how you classify McIntyre because he was in their system. I don't know all of his history before. He was first when he came to the main roster on SmackDown. I don't know if he's got a lot of background, but he was a guy that was there before. Outside of that, I think you've got guys that have come in from TNA and ROH, like Rude and Eric Young and
Gargano, from
Gargano's from Evolve, right? Now you've got Cole, O'Reilly, Fish. The other guys that they've had that have kind of come through there. The Revival, I think, obviously I'm sure they've had some indie work, but they weren't really like famous, I think, before they came up. So, it's hard. It's a big mix, but I think it's more guys that they've brought in from the outside that kind of have some name value.
Well, but it does make for a very intriguing show. And speaking of intriguing, I would like to welcome into the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast, Lance Archer. Welcome to the show, sir.
What's up, man?
Not much, man. We really appreciate you coming on, and I just want to say, we're talking former NWA TNA World Tag Team Champion, New Japan Pro Wrestling IWGP Heavyweight Tag Team Champion, G1 Tag League winner, Pro Wrestling Noah Tag Team Champion. What in the business? Where haven't you been?
Well, I've been fired from a lot of places, so I've had opportunities to go into a lot of different companies. I've been lucky and blessed, man, in this crazy business of professional wrestling. 17 years, had some amazing opportunities with TNA back when TNA first was really getting going and getting started from, just the early Nashville days and then on into the first Impact stuff that we were doing out of Orlando and all the first pay-per-views and really all the first that TNA was producing when the company was still brand new, to my short time in WWE, my many different times to Japan. I was going to Japan before I even did WWE. Did some independent stuff in Japan, did a tour with All Japan, and then I did my time with WWE for those 2 years. And then, like you said, I signed on with New Japan Pro Wrestling back in 2011 and have been in Japan ever since. And it's been an amazingly cool, fun ride. And it's about to get going here again because I've been on about a 6-month hiatus from an injury and getting ready to start that first tour back with New Japan here in September.
Absolutely. And before, we touch on, I want to talk about the early stuff you had at TNA, but I know you spoke about the injury. It was the herniated disc surgery. I think it was it was Killer Reed Squad versus Makabe and Honma and Ishii and Yano, and that's, that was a feud that you had going on for a long time with Makabe. Tell me what happened, how that injury happened. Was it something that you felt during the match, or was it something that you've been dealing with and just kind of came to a head?
Yeah, basically that's what it was. I'd been dealing with a sciatic issue, which anybody that's ever had sciatic issues knows, it comes and it goes as far as the severity. In wrestling, I don't think anybody's ever 100% at any given time. And I was just working through the goods and bads and doing what I could when it was bad and then doing more, obviously, when it was good. And actually that match you're speaking of in Sapporo on February 5th, I was really good. I was ready to go. I was barely feeling anything, as far as any kind of pain or discomfort or anything. And we had the match and nothing specific happened in the match. It was just something must have happened either in that match or during the run-in or something like that, because every day following that, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse to the point where ultimately, I got it evaluated in Japan, and then they tried to give me a few days off hoping it would get better. And it just got worse and worse and worse to the point where they had to check me in the hospital and basically did kind of an emergency surgery because on the Saturday, which was February 11th, which was the same day that the rest of the guys were in Osaka, Japan, which was the end of the tour, and I was supposed to be a part of that, I was having a surgery, which the doctors moved everything up and called some anesthesiologists in for me and for that specific purpose. And it was a blessing, man. I say, and I have faith that God took care of me exactly where he needed me to be taken care of. He knocked me on my butt exactly when I need to be knocked on my butt, and then brought everything into play exactly how it should have been.
That's a glass half full approach, man. I'm glad to hear that you recovered so well from it. I deal with it myself. And I got to ask you, going over to Japan, how tough is that plane right on you? I can't imagine that being very good for the back either.
I mean, I've just been doing it for so many years. It's one of those things, like the long plane rides don't bother me as much because the planes are bigger. I have good status with Delta, and the New Japan flies me over on Delta every time. So I get to pick and choose my seats. So I get to pick and choose kind of, it's coach. I don't get any business class seats unless I get very lucky, but I get to choose, the economy comforts, or I get to choose the exit row, which has nothing in front of me. Like I said, there's more space. I can get up and move around, walk around, stretch up and whatnot. The smaller planes, the little regional jets and, the state bouncers, they're the worst ones because they're so small and compact and you can't really get up and move and do anything.
Kudos to New Japan for taking care of you, man. That's a long flight, so I give you credit for that. So you spoke about your time in TNA. I mean, between Hoytomania, which ran wild, which I thought was awesome, and that's testament to you being able to get that over. I thought that was one of the coolest things. The crowd really ate that up. How did that come about?
That was really on the fans, man. Like I said, everything was very early on in the TNA days, and we definitely had a very hardcore TNA fan base, people that loved TNA, that came to TNA, especially when we came into Orlando. And it was really their creation. I just was doing my part and trying to wrestle my heart out like I always did. And for whatever reason, I would like to say a large group of people decided that they liked me. They would make signs and stuff to the point where they would have to ask them to put them down because, it's blocking people's view. And then they went and made their own shirts. There was a rumor backstage that I was taking these people out to eat at the Orlando Ale House, which was a place where everybody would go eat afterwards. And it's like, I don't know if anybody realized the paycheck I was receiving. There was no way I was catering, 8, 10, 12, 15 plus people just so they would cheer for me, in their named Hoytomania section, So it was really their creation. A guy who actually became a good friend of mine. His name's Michael Kerrigan. He lives out in Orlando still. I'm really close with him and his family, and he kind of spearheaded that. And good man, good person, good family, and it's kind of funny and cool. Like I said, they took it upon themselves and created their own thing, and I just had fun with it and got to feed off the energy for a while.
That's a great story. And so, breaking news: you were not behind the Hoytomania. I want everybody to know that now.
No,
not you.
No.
cool.
Hulkamania got paid well by Hulkamania got paid well by TNA, not Hoytomania.
Now, like you said, the early days of TNA. I mean, I'm still a fan of Impact Wrestling right now. I'm sorry, GFW. I don't know whatever it is named now, but
it's still Impact Wrestling.
Yeah, it's Impact Wrestling according to my TV guide, but then the GFW titles, I don't know. But, they had like the weekly pay-per-views, and the crowd back then, I think, was equally as loud as almost the Barclays Center was last weekend, because that diehard fan base, it really did remind me of, the old school ECW arena or the Madhouse of Extreme in Queens. It was that, that tight-knit bond where I think everybody in the arena wanted that company to succeed.
Yeah, and the weekly pay-per-views you're talking about, those were in Nashville. So the Asylum, as they dubbed it, was a very, very small, intimate arena. It fit, I don't know, anywhere from 700 to 1,000 people, I think, depending on how many people just chose to pack in there and whatnot. And, it was a fun environment. Like you said, they were really into it and they were really behind it. And, like I said, it's very niche and it was their own. I think they were pretty sad to see us leave, but the company was in a growth period when we left Nashville and went just Orlando for the Impact stuff.
After Hoytomania, you had one of I would say the coolest teams that was the Rock and Rave Infection. Is that something that, again, is that organic, or how did that one come about?
Oh, everything in this business happens in different ways, I guess. I've been with the company for several years at this point. Had wrestled under 2 different names. Dallas was my first name when I started at TNA, and then Dusty Rhodes was the one who had me start working under my real name, Lance Hoyt. The Rock and Rave Infection thing came about. Basically, Vince Russo, who was one of the bookers at the time, he was a big fan of Jimmy Rave and wanted to bring Jimmy into the company. And then he talked to me already and said that he wanted us to be a tag team. I was like, that's cool. I don't know Jimmy at all at the time. Jimmy was doing his thing, or had been doing his thing at Ring of Honor back in the day when he'd get toilet paper thrown into the ring at him, which I thought was one of the most unique, cool things that anybody's ever had